In the summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg turned into the strangest dance floor in history. It started with one woman, swaying, twirling, stomping in the hot sun. But she couldn't stop. Within days, dozens joined her. No music, no festival, just an unstoppable, feverish rhythm. They danced until their feet bled. They danced until their bodies gave out. And some never got up again. Was it mass hysteria? Poisoned bread? Or something darker that gripped the city? Tonight, we unravel the mystery of the dancing plague. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a summer that should have been ordinary. But in Strasbourg, 1518, one woman decided to start dancing and then never stopped. You'll hear the scrape of worn leather soles on cobblestones, the muffled thud of a heel-meeting stone, over and over. You'll smell the heat baking the marketplace, hear the occasional bray of a mule that clearly has no idea why humans are doing this to themselves, and you'll feel the slow creep of unease as you realize she's not smiling. This isn't joy, this is something else entirely. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not if you're stuck in her shoes, or lack of shoes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and the local time so I know exactly where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins on a narrow lane edged with faded timbered houses. The sun hangs low but already feels like midday in a baker's oven. You trudge along, basket in hand, weaving between carts and the occasional goat nibbling on a vegetable crate. That's when you notice her. Frau Trophäa, a woman you've seen before, carrying water or haggling over bread. Today she's doing neither. Instead, she's in the middle of the street, shoes discarded, moving her arms and legs in jerks and sweeps. Not graceful, but not drunken either. Her face is tight, eyes wide, as if she's trying to run from something you can't see. Except her feet never stop tapping, crossing, turning. One man leans against a doorway muttering, "It's the heat, gone to her head." Another shakes his head, whispering about Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and, apparently, curses. You pause. She's been at it since dawn, someone says. No break for water, no pause to sit. The hem of her dress darkens with sweat and dust. A stray dog circles her twice, then gives up, settling in the shade like everyone else who's decided to wait this out. As the minutes turn into an hour, you realize she's not slowing. Her breathing is ragged, but her limbs move as though powered by a stubborn rhythm only she hears. The cobblestones beneath her feet, you've walked them 1,000 times, are uneven, biting into skin. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't even seem to notice. Historians still argue whether her condition was born of illness, a trance, or something more supernatural. In your moment, here in 1518, all you know is that your errands are forgotten. You, like everyone else, are watching a lone woman dance against the summer sun, against reason, maybe against her own will. The crowd thickens. Children edge closer, curious but wary, as if she might suddenly burst into flame. An older man crosses himself 3 times. Somewhere behind you, a merchant chuckles nervously, because laughter feels safer than admitting you're unsettled. And through it all, Frau Trophäa keeps dancing. By the next morning, the gossip has outpaced the church bells. You wake to the sound of voices in the street, urgent and overlapping like pigeons startled into flight. They're all talking about the same thing. Frau Trophea hasn't stopped. Not through the night. Not even for a breath of shade. You step outside into the heavy morning air. Already the sun clings to your skin like a damp cloth. People are gathered at the edge of the marketplace, their shadows stretching long across the dirt. And there she is again. Same patch of cobblestone, same frayed hem dragging through dust. But this time she's not alone. Two young men, apprentices by their stained tunics, sway in uneven circles beside her. Their steps are wild, but their faces, it's that same strained mask you saw on her yesterday. Determination? Fear? You can't quite tell. They move as though strings are tied to their wrists, ankles, pulling them into steps they never chose. A baker's wife leans toward you, her voice low but trembling with a mix of thrill and dread. "It's catching," she says, "like the sweating sickness, but with this." She gestures toward the writhing figures. First her, now them. And they say a boy joined them last night, danced till he dropped. He's home now, but he twitches in his sleep. You can hear it now. The faint slap of skin on stone where shoes have been lost. The scrape of knees hitting cobblestone when someone stumbles, only to be yanked back into the rhythm as though the ground itself demands it. Children climb onto barrels for a better view, calling out guesses as to how many more will join. Merchants who should be arranging their wares instead lean against their stalls, eyes fixed on the scene. Even the fishmonger, usually deaf to anything but the sound of coins, watches with his arms folded tight. Historians still argue whether this was mass psychogenic illness, an outbreak of hysteria fed by fear and suggestion, or something stranger still. In your moment, it feels more like the town itself has been infected by an unseen song, the kind that gets in your bones and refuses to leave. A tall man with a feathered cap, a notary, you think, steps forward, hand outstretched to one of the young dancers. "Enough now," he says. The youth's eyes dart toward him, pleading, but his feet keep moving. When the man grabs his arm, it's like trying to pull a fish from a river, slippery, frantic, desperate. And then, as if on cue, two more women shuffle forward from the crowd, their hips rocking, their skirts twisting around their ankles. The murmurs behind you sharpen into a gasp. This is no longer one woman's madness. This is becoming a gathering. By midday, you've counted at least 15 people swaying, spinning, stomping, none to the same beat, yet all trapped in motion. The air smells of sweat and dust, the kind that cakes in your nostrils. Somewhere a dog barks, but the sound is swallowed by the murmur of the crowd and the uneven patter of feet. A merchant mutters, "This will bring trouble. You'll see." And looking at the growing circle of dancers under the relentless sun, you can't shake the feeling he's right. The heat by afternoon is like a thick wall pressing down on every living thing in Strasbourg. You can taste it in the air, dry and metallic, clinging to your tongue. Even the shade under the narrow timbered eaves feels heavy. Yet out in the square, the dancers keep going. You watch as Frau Trophea's bare feet slap against the cobblestones, not in joyful rhythm, but in a harsh, mechanical pattern. The stones here aren't smooth. They're worn, uneven, patched in places where years of wagon wheels have ground them into dips. Every step must feel like stepping on teeth. Her arches flatten, toes curling over rough edges, yet she doesn't slow. You glance around at the others caught in the same strange compulsion. A man in a dark wool tunic grimaces as he lands on a stone shard, a small bead of red staining the gray beneath him. Another woman grips her own skirt so tightly her knuckles are white, as if holding onto fabric might somehow anchor her. In the crowd, you overhear murmurs. "It's the sun," one man insists, his face already ruddy. "Heat makes the blood boil. Once they cool down, it'll pass." But an older woman shakes her head and whispers of curses, that this is the punishment of Saint Vitus, sent for sins unnamed. A boy pipes up that it's the work of the devil and is promptly shushed by his mother. The smells shift with the heat. Fresh bread from a nearby stall, horse manure from a cart too long in the sun, the faint tang of sweat from both dancer and spectator alike. You realize you're sweating too, though you're standing still. Historians still argue whether this was simple delirium from heat and hunger or something darker, perhaps poisoned bread laced with ergot fungus, a hallucinogenic that can warp the mind. You don't know about fungi or toxins. All you see is the raw exhaustion on faces that should have stopped hours ago. One man stumbles and drops to his knees. The crowd surges forward, ready to help, but before anyone can touch him, his legs jerk him upright again, feet slamming against the stones as if they belong to someone else. A ripple of unease moves through the spectators. You swallow, suddenly aware of the hard, hot cobbles under your own shoes. Nearby, a girl no older than 12 has begun hopping from one foot to the other, her eyes wide and unblinking. A neighbor reaches to pull her away, but her body resists, pulled toward the throng. A stray gust of wind sends dust swirling, catching in everyone's throats. The coughs of the watchers mix with the sharp, irregular rhythm of the dancers' steps. In the oppressive heat, the city feels smaller, tighter, as though the very stones underfoot are conspiring to keep you here, watching, waiting to see who will be next. By the next sunrise, the marketplace is as much a stage as it is a place of trade. You can hear it before you see it. A low hum of voices, punctuated by the occasional shout of recognition when someone notices a new dancer has joined. You edge through the crowd, brushing past wool-clad shoulders and the sharp scent of onions from a grocer's stall. The dancers are still there, though their movements have grown stranger. It's no longer just swaying or stamping. Some spin in jagged half-turns. Others lurch forward like marionettes with tangled strings. In the murmuring knots of onlookers, rumors are bubbling faster than the summer ale. One man insists this is the work of witches, that a coven in the hills has cursed the city for a petty slight. A woman selling eggs claims it's divine punishment, that God is forcing these people to dance away their sins in full view of their neighbors. Someone else whispers about bad bread, though he doesn't explain how bread could make a person dance until they collapse. A young boy tugs at his mother's skirt, pointing to the sweat-soaked face of one dancer. "Why doesn't he just stop?" The mother gives a vague answer, eyes darting away, as if looking too long might invite the curse into her own bones. Historians still argue whether this was truly mass hysteria, fed by fear and superstition, or whether physical illness played the greater role. In your moment here, it's less about what's true and more about what feels real. And the reality is, each whispered theory carries its own chill. The marketplace smells sharper now. Sour sweat, churned dust, and the faint hint of panic in the air. Merchants hawk their goods with less enthusiasm, their eyes drifting back to the spectacle. Even those who mutter about superstition keep their distance, forming a ring that no one dares to cross, unless they're being pulled into the dance. You pass two older men deep in conversation. One says, "It started with her, Frau Trophäa. That's the name I heard. Dancing since the first day." The other nods grimly. "And they say she's cursed the rest. I heard she looked right at young Klaus before he joined." They don't notice you listening, too intent on their theory to care. Somewhere behind you, a crier's voice rises, trying to be heard above the crowd. "Keep away from the afflicted. Keep your children inside." But you can tell from the glances and the restless shifting of feet that no one intends to leave. There's something magnetic here, something in the sight of people moving without choice that keeps everyone rooted. In a moment of strange clarity, you realize the crowd has grown not just to watch, but to wait. To see if someone they know will begin to sway, to stamp, to turn. It's no longer just a performance. It's a question hanging over the heads of every person here. What if it's me next? Charles. By the end of the week, the noise has reached the doors of the church. You find yourself slipping into the cool shadow of the cathedral, partly to escape the heat, partly to hear what the priests are saying. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and incense, the faint sweetness clinging to the stone columns. A few candles gutter in their sconces, their flames wobbling with the faint breeze from the open doors. At the altar, two priests speak in low, urgent tones, their voices bouncing gently off the high arches. One, a narrow-faced man with deep lines at his brow, argues that the dancers are sinners in need of penance, that they have fallen under temptation and must be corrected with prayer and fasting. The other, rounder and red-cheeked, shakes his head. "No, this is sickness," he insists. "We've seen fevers that burn the mind. This is no different." They are not the only ones debating. You overhear a group of townsfolk kneeling in the side chapel, whispering fervent prayers to Saint Vitus, the patron of dancers and those afflicted by convulsions. His name has become a refrain in the streets, as if invoking him might draw his attention or his mercy. Historians still argue whether the church's role in such outbreaks helped or hindered. Some records suggest priests recommended more dancing, believing it would dance out the sickness. Others claim the clergy saw it as a spiritual battle that needed exorcism, not encouragement. When you step back into the sunlit square, the air feels heavier after the cool of the cathedral. The crowd has shifted. The dancers now form a loose chain, hands occasionally touching as they sway and turn. It's not coordinated, but it has the eerie suggestion of ritual. A nun moves through the crowd, her veil fluttering in the warm breeze. She holds a small wooden cross, pressing it into the hands of those who'll take it, murmuring blessings. Some clutch it as they watch. Others tuck it away without a glance, eyes fixed on the dancers. From the steps of the church, you can see the full spread of the scene. The bright flash of skirts, the bent backs of the exhausted, the grim set of mouths forced open in silent gasps for air. It's both mesmerizing and deeply wrong, like watching a clock that ticks out of rhythm but still keeps moving forward. And you know, just as the priests know, that the church can't keep ignoring this. Whatever is happening here, it's not stopping on its own. The city elders summon physicians, hoping for answers science, or at least the closest thing to it in 1518, might provide. You stand near the council chamber doorway as a small group of doctors in dark robes emerge, their expressions oddly satisfied, as if they've been handed a puzzle worth their reputations. In the square, one of them, a tall man with a goatee and a pointed hat, addresses the crowd. He claims the dancers suffer from hot blood, an excess of heat in the body that must be released. The solution, he says with confidence, is not rest, but more dancing. Sweat it out, burn away the illness. You blink, waiting for laughter, but the crowd murmurs as though this makes perfect sense. A few even nod approvingly, their relief palpable. The cure sounds far less frightening than an exorcism or public whipping. Within the hour, city officials are hiring musicians, drummers, fiddlers, pipers, anyone who can keep a beat. They're told to encourage the afflicted, to keep them moving until the malady runs its course. Platforms are built in the square to give the players a vantage point. Soon, the air fills with the clatter of drums and the thin wail of violins, layered over the irregular stomps and shuffles of the dancers. Historians still argue whether this approach made the plague worse, drawing in more victims through a kind of infectious spectacle, or whether the authorities genuinely believed they were following sound medical practice. You, standing there in the press of bodies, can't help thinking it's like throwing oil on a fire and calling it rain. The musicians themselves wear a mix of fascination and unease. Some grin, clearly enjoying the attention and coin. Others avoid eye contact with the dancers, their eyes fixed on their instruments as though looking directly at the afflicted might invite trouble. The beat becomes relentless, a low, insistent pulse that worms its way into your skull. You find your own foot tapping once or twice before you catch yourself. It's easy to imagine how someone might slip into the movement without realizing it. Near the edge of the crowd, a man selling herbal tonics shouts that his brew can cool the blood and free the body from this curse. He waves a clay jug at passers-by, but most ignore him, drawn instead toward the music and the sight of bodies bending and twisting in the heat. From your vantage point, you see that the dancers' numbers have grown. The lines between onlookers and participants blur, a step forward here, a sway there, until someone crosses the invisible boundary and becomes part of the afflicted. The doctors, watching from the shade, nod as if satisfied their prescription is working. But from where you stand, the only thing spreading faster than the dancing is the fear. By midday, the square feels like a living drum. The beat from the hired musicians threads through every alley, bouncing off walls until it's impossible to find a truly quiet corner. You weave between stalls, the air thick with the smell of fried fish, ripe melons, and sweat. The strange perfume of a festival that isn't a festival. The drummers keep a steady pulse, their palms slick against stretched hides. Fiddlers saw at their strings until the sound turns harsh and thin, each note dragging at your nerves. Every so often, a piper trills something bright and lilting, the kind of tune you might hear at a wedding, except here it has a feverish edge. The dancers respond to every note, like a wave shifting with the tide. They leap, spin, shuffle, collapse, only to be hauled upright by their own traitorous limbs. One woman lets out a hoarse laugh that dissolves into sobbing, yet her feet never stop. A man tears open the front of his shirt, the linen plastered to his chest with sweat, and throws his head back in a wild, silent howl. Historians still argue whether music in this moment was a blessing or a curse, whether it kept the dancers alive by helping them pace themselves, or whether it deepened the trance, binding them tighter to whatever compulsion held them. In your ears, the rhythm is hypnotic, tugging at the muscles in your legs even as you stand still. Children in the crowd mimic the steps for fun, clapping along until their mothers pull them back with a warning glare. Merchants abandon their calls to buy bread or fish, leaning on counters, letting the music flood over them. And then there's the sound you can't quite place, a constant muffled thud beneath the instruments. You realize it's the dancers' feet hitting the cobbles, dozens of impacts per second, each landing uneven, each one a reminder of flesh meeting stone. A man collapses mid-step, catching himself on his hands. The crowd gasps, but the musicians don't falter. The rhythm continues as others dance around him, until, with a shuddering groan, he's back on his feet, moving again. It's as if stopping entirely is no longer possible. Somewhere behind you, a woman murmurs, "Saint Vitus, have mercy," as if the saint might be listening through the music. The beat goes on. By now, the line between spectacle and tragedy has dissolved completely. You stand near the well in the square, its bucket rope creaking softly in the faint breeze, and you count at least 50 dancers moving in uneven circles. Their clothes cling dark with sweat. Their hair is plastered to their foreheads. And then you notice something you'd been trying not to see: bodies on the ground. A young man lies sprawled beside the steps of a merchant's house, chest rising and falling in quick, shallow bursts. His boots are gone, his feet raw, the skin split in places. A woman kneels next to him, calling his name over and over, but his eyes stay shut. A few feet away, another man drops mid-step, landing hard on one shoulder. The crowd parts, but not too far. They've grown used to these sudden collapses. Two dancers stumble over him before he's dragged to the side, his arms twitching as though the rhythm still echoes inside him. Historians still argue whether people truly danced themselves to death during this outbreak, or if the deaths were from exhaustion, dehydration, or heart failure triggered by the relentless movement. Here in the heat and dust of 1518, the difference doesn't matter. What matters is that the bodies are real. The city's physicians appear again, this time looking less certain. One fans himself with his hat, muttering that the heat is taking its toll. Another insists they must keep the afflicted moving until the humors balance. His words are met with skeptical glances, but no one proposes a better plan. The music continues, though you notice the drummers exchanging uneasy looks. Even the fiddler's bows move slower now, as if the sight of so many exhausted bodies is starting to seep into their bones. A child tugs at your sleeve, eyes wide, pointing toward a girl no older than 16 who has collapsed near the fountain. You watch as her friends lift her, trying to steady her back onto her feet. Her legs jerk, half willing, half forced, until she's shuffling again. Her head lolls back, mouth open, eyes glassy. The smell is sharper now. Sweat gone sour, dust turned to mud where water has spilled, and an undercurrent of something metallic. You tell yourself it's just the heat. A man beside you crosses himself and mutters, "This can't go on." But as you look at the restless crowd, the music, the dancers who refuse to fall for long, you're not sure anyone knows how to stop it. Word has spread far beyond the marketplace now, and the city council can no longer pretend this is just an odd summer diversion. This morning, the bells toll not for a wedding or a saint's day, but for an emergency gathering. You join the stream of townsfolk toward the steps of the town hall, where the air smells faintly of parchment, sweat, and the sharp tang of the tannery down the road. Council members spiont on in their long robes, their voices overlapping in heated debate. A thin man with a scroll insists that the dancers must be confined, kept away from the healthy. A heavier-set counselor shakes his head, declaring that isolation will drive them mad, that the cure lies in managing the dance, not ending it. From your place among the listeners, you hear fragments of the proposals. Close the taverns to keep crowds from growing. Ban music in the streets. Impose curfews to limit the gatherings after sundown. Forbid gatherings in the market square entirely. But these rules are easier said than enforced. The musicians, now earning more than they have in years, are reluctant to pack up their drums. Merchants mutter that without the crowd, their sales will vanish, and the afflicted themselves cannot be ordered into stillness. You've seen how impossible that is. Historians still argue whether these early restrictions were more for show than for actual prevention. The surviving records suggest that while authorities made decrees, the dancing continued openly, a stubborn refusal to be legislated out of existence. By afternoon, the guards are patrolling with halberds, not to threaten the dancers, but to keep the onlookers from pressing too close. You see them ushering children away, chasing stray dogs, and scolding those who try to mimic the dancers for a laugh. A new rumor begins to ripple through the crowd. The council is considering a pilgrimage to a nearby shrine, offering the afflicted to St. Vitus in exchange for relief. Some nod as though this is the only logical step left. Others roll their eyes, muttering about superstition and the waste of resources. You glance back toward the square, where the music has grown slower but heavier, the drum beats like heartbeats amplified. The dancers move on, seemingly oblivious to the fact that their city is now in full-blown crisis mode. As the sun sets behind the rooftops, casting the square in long shadows, you have the uneasy sense that Strasbourg itself is starting to bend under the weight of this strange, relentless rhythm, and that whatever the council decides, it might already be too late to stop it. The morning of the pilgrimage arrives with a kind of solemn bustle. You wake to the sound of carts creaking under the weight of barrels, water skins, and hastily gathered supplies. The air smells faintly of damp earth from an overnight mist, but it does nothing to soften the tension running through the streets. The afflicted are being gathered, not forcibly, but with an odd mix of coaxing and gentle herding. A priest in a brown robe walks at the front of one group, holding aloft a wooden cross as if its presence alone might lead them to relief. The dancers, pale and sweat-soaked, sway as they shuffle forward. Even in motion toward the shrine, their steps are involuntary, dictated by that same internal pull that has held them for days. You decide to join the procession, partly out of curiosity, partly out of an unshakable need to see if this will work. The road out of Strasbourg curves between wheat fields just beginning to turn golden. Birds wheel overhead, their cries sharp in the morning air. The contrast between the peaceful countryside and the jerking, staggering line of dancers is unsettling. Along the way, villagers come out to watch. Some cross themselves. Others mutter warnings to keep the afflicted away from their homes. One old man spits into the dust, claiming the curse will follow the dancers wherever they go. Historians still argue whether these pilgrimages were acts of desperation or a genuine belief in saintly intervention. Some accounts suggest the shrine to St. Vitus was specifically chosen because of his association with nervous disorders and convulsions. To the people walking beside you now, it doesn't matter why, only that it might offer an end. Hours pass. The road is lined with hedges, the smell of crushed leaves rising underfoot. From time to time, one of the afflicted stumbles into the ditch, only to be helped up and urged forward. A drummer has joined the procession, his beat slower now, more like a heartbeat than a festival rhythm. As the shrine comes into view, a modest stone building with a carved image of the saint over the doorway, the priests begin chanting. The sound is low and steady, wrapping itself around the ragged breaths of the dancers. You watch as they are led inside, the cool shadow swallowing them one by one. Some kneel, some collapse outright, and some keep dancing even before the altar. You can't tell yet if the pilgrimage is working, but you can feel something shift in the air. Whether it's hope or simply exhaustion, you're not sure. The shrine's stone floor is cool beneath your feet, a stark contrast to the sun-baked streets of Strasbourg. Inside, the air is still and carries the faint metallic tang of old candle smoke. Light filters through narrow windows, dust motes drifting like lazy snow. The afflicted are arranged near the front, some kneeling, others swaying in place, their eyes half-lidded, as if hovering between wakefulness and dream. A priest sprinkles holy water over them, the droplets catching in hair and on flushed faces. You hear murmurs, not from the afflicted, but from those who've come as witnesses. One man in a merchant's cloak leans toward you. "I saw this before," he whispers, "in a village by the Rhine years ago. A handful of people, all moving the same way, as if they were listening to the same voice." You ask what happened to them. He shrugs. Some stopped after a week. Others... He lets the sentence trail off. Later, as you step outside to breathe the cooler air, you find more pilgrims arriving. Not just from Strasbourg, but from smaller towns in the hills. They bring their own afflicted, each with their own tale. A shepherd who began tapping his foot one evening and never stopped. A young woman who awoke dancing in the middle of the night. A boy who joined a market crowd out of curiosity and found his legs unwilling to stop. Historians still argue whether these accounts were truly connected or simply coincidental outbreaks feeding on rumor. Yet the similarities are difficult to ignore, especially as you stand here and watch them filter toward the shrine in the same uneven steps. By afternoon, the steps leading to the entrance are crowded. Some who enter emerge later, calmer, their movement slowed to a shuffle or stopped entirely. Others come back out with no change, still trapped in their relentless rhythm. One older woman, her hair sticking to her damp cheeks, clutches a wooden token carved with the image of Saint Vitus. She presses it into your hand, muttering, "For protection." The wood is warm from her grip, and you slip it into your pocket without thinking. From the hilltop above the shrine, you look back toward the road. In the distance, you can see the faint dust of another group approaching. Proof that whatever this is, it's not contained to Strasbourg alone. The mystery, it seems, is growing legs. That evening, you find yourself seated by the shrine's outer wall, the stone radiating the last of the day's warmth. A group of travelers has gathered nearby, their cloaks smelling faintly of road dust and smoke from distant hearths. They speak in low voices, sharing what they've heard, seen, or guessed about the plague that dances people into ruin. A young scholar with ink stains on his fingers leans forward, clearly eager to talk. "It's ergot," he says, as though revealing a personal discovery. "A fungus in the rye. You eat the bread, and it poisons you, twists your mind with visions, and, in rare cases, sets the body to convulsing." He grins, clearly proud of his theory. Across from him, A wiry man in a leather jerkin shakes his head. Nonsense. This is Saint Vitus himself, displeased. You've heard the stories. He can make you dance until your sins are burned out. He crosses himself, half in habit, half in caution. Then a third voice, soft but cutting through the rest. A woman in a plain linen cap. It's neither poison nor saints. It's the mind. Fear, panic, suggestion. One person starts, the rest follow, and before you know it, the body obeys a rhythm that isn't real. She folds her hands. I've seen it in convents. Young sisters fainting in rows, convinced they share the same ailment. Historians still argue which, if any, of these explanations comes closest to the truth. Modern minds lean toward mass psychogenic illness, a shared psychological condition, spreading like wildfire through tight-knit, stressed communities. But here in 1518, every theory holds weight depending on who you ask, and none can be proven beyond doubt. As the night deepens, the conversation turns darker. Someone mentions ancient rites, pagan celebrations where dance and trance were tools to reach the divine. Another suggests secret cults, using the chaos to mask their own gatherings. A man claims to have seen one dancer's eyes flash white as moonlight before he fell unconscious, only to rise again moments later. You sit quietly, letting their words settle like the embers in a dying fire. The air smells of rosemary from a nearby cooking pot, and the faint, sour tang of sweat from those still afflicted in the shrine. Somewhere beyond the hill, you hear the faint thump of a drum. Slow, steady, far away, yet it makes your own heartbeat match its pace for a moment. Theories swirl, each one stranger or more convincing than the last. But none of them explains why. Even after days and miles, the dancing hasn't stopped. The days bleed together, marked only by the slow dwindling of dancers. One by one, some simply stop. You see it happen with no fanfare. A woman mid-step who suddenly freezes, breathes in deep, and sits down on the edge of the road. A man who collapses in the dust and, when he's helped up, finds his legs steady again. The change is gradual, but you can feel it. The music that once echoed through the streets is quieter now. The drummers have gone home. The fiddlers play half-heartedly before packing up their bows. Without the relentless rhythm, the remaining dancers seem adrift, their movements less urgent, as if whatever force had gripped them is loosening its hold. Back in Strasbourg, the market regains some of its old patterns. Merchants shout prices again. Bakers pull fresh loaves from their ovens without glancing toward the square every few minutes. Even the guards look less tense, leaning on their halberds as they chat in the sun. Historians still argue whether the cessation of the dancing was due to physical exhaustion finally breaking the cycle, or whether the social energy that fueled it simply ran out. Some believe the pilgrimage and the blessings of St. Vitus brought relief. Others think it was time alone that ended the strange compulsion. You walk through the streets and notice the marks it's left behind. Scuffed cobblestones where bare feet struck day after day. A stain of red in a crack between stones, long since dried. Torn scraps of linen caught in a cartwheel. These quiet remains speak louder than the rumors that still drift between neighbors. And yet, a part of you expects to hear it again. The irregular thump of soles on stone. The faint thread of music winding through the air. When you pass the fountain in the square, you linger, half expecting Frau Trophea to appear from some side street, feet already moving. But she doesn't. The square is empty except for a stray cat washing its paws in the sunlight. The silence feels heavier than the music ever did. Weeks pass, and life in Strasbourg settles into something resembling normal. Or at least, the version of normal that comes after you've watched friends and neighbors dance themselves to collapse. You find yourself in the tavern one evening, the low murmur of conversation blending with the clink of mugs and the faint hiss of roasting meat from the kitchen. At a nearby table, two men debate the events as if they were a story from another town. One insists it will be remembered as a curse lifted by Saint Vitus himself, proof of divine intervention. The other rolls his eyes, claiming it was nothing but hot blood and weak minds. And they drink, they argue, and the laughter that follows feels almost forced, like they're trying to prove the city has moved on. But the truth is, the dancing plague has already begun to take on a life of its own beyond the streets where it happened. Minstrels pass through, weaving it into their ballads. You hear snippets of song about the summer of the endless dance, sung in corners of the market. A merchant shows you a woodcut he bought from a traveling artist. A crude image of a crowd mid-leap, faces caught between joy and agony. Historians still argue how much of what survives in art and song is true, and how much is embellishment. In your time, you can already see the details shifting. The number of dancers grows in the telling. The hours stretch into days, and the deaths are counted with an uncertainty that makes them feel more legend than fact. Children dare each other to mimic the jerky steps in the square. An apprentice baker sells dancer's bread with a wink, promising it will keep your feet busy. Even in jest, the memory lingers like the faint echo of a drumbeat. At night, lying in your bed, you sometimes think you hear that drum again, a slow, hollow thump under the wind's whistle through the shutters. You tell yourself it's just the wind. Still, you listen a moment longer before sleep takes you. The plague has ended, but the story has only begun its journey through the centuries. It's late when you decide to leave Strasbourg behind for a while. The night air is cool, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from hearths banked for the evening. You walk slowly through streets that once pulsed with the shuffle and stomp of the afflicted, now quiet except for the soft echo of your own footsteps. The moon hangs low, casting silver over the rooftops and catching on the worn edges of the cobblestones. You pass the fountain where Frau Trophea first began, its basin still and dark. For a moment, you almost expect to see her shape there, moving to that invisible rhythm. But the space is empty, and the silence is deep enough to feel like a blanket. Historians still argue what truly happened here, and maybe they always will. Was it illness? Mass hysteria? A punishment from the divine? Or an ancient echo of something buried deep in the human mind? You've heard all the theories, watched all the faces, the ones lost in movement, the ones staring in fear, the ones trying to make sense of it all. As you reach the edge of the city, the road stretches out under the stars, pale and dusted with moonlight. The fields on either side whisper with the soft rustle of summer wind through grain. Far off, a lone owl calls, and the sound settles into the quiet like the final note of a song. You keep walking, the memory of the music, real or imagined, fading with each step. But you know the story will follow you, the way strange things do, not with noise but with a shadow in the mind, ready to stir when the night is still enough. The road bends gently, guiding you past fields where the stalks sway slow, unhurried. as if reminding you that not everything moves in fevered rhythms. The stars above seem brighter here, away from the clustered lamps of the city, their cold light spilling down like silver dust. You walk without urgency, letting the stillness seep into your bones. Each step a quiet contrast to the days of pounding feet you've left behind. Somewhere in the distance you think you hear water, maybe a stream slipping over stones. A softer rhythm now, one that calms rather than compels. The night air cools your skin, carrying with it the faint sweetness of cut hay and the earthy smell of damp soil. Every sound is clear and slow. The sigh of wind in the grass, the creak of leather as you shift your pack, the occasional chirp of a late cricket. The weight in your chest loosens, replaced by an easy, steady breath. Your shoulders relax. The image of the dancers, the tense lines of their faces, the wild movement of their limbs, drifts further back in your mind, growing dimmer with each passing step. Above you, the moon slides higher, its light softening the edges of the world. You let it guide you, not toward any destination, but simply forward, through the quiet, toward the promise of rest. And as you walk, the silence wraps around you like a warm cloak, and the night feels endless in the best way. A space to lay down the noise of the day and let the mind wander gently into dreams. Sleep comes easy here, under a sky like this.